Hey, Bill. Thanks for using Racers 360. It's Dion here. Excited to be working with you. Ultimately, you're driving really well. So everything we're going to be talking about is there's no low-hanging fruit. There's a couple little small line things. Really kind of focus in on getting that throttle application to come consistently a little bit later, and changing our priorities a little bit. So in your notes, you talked about you're braking a little bit early, squaring off the corners a little bit much. Both of which are true. And the way I like to coach is, breaking deeper is the last thing we work on because it's where the risk is the highest. So what we want to do here is kind of give you two other steps to focus in on that I think will naturally help you break deeper, but it won't be till where you're like really trying to break deeper. That's not the focal point of what we're going to work on. But I think when we kind of adjust some things in your driving, it'll kind of naturally happen in a lower risk way. So what we're going to do here is we're going to play at full speed to start off with. I'm going to keep the volume off as much as possible just because the quality isn't there and it doesn't come through well on your end. When I'm going to use the volume, what I'm going to do with it is I'm going to try to pause it where I hear that initial throttle application start to feed in. So what I'm going to do here in turn one, I'm going to turn the volume back up again. I'm just going to pause it where I hear that throttle come in. So we're starting to feed in a tiny bit of throttle here already. And this is going to be something that's a little bit consistent. You do it well on some of the corners, but kind of one of the more consistent areas I saw is we're starting to pick up the throttle just a little bit too early. Now, I'd really like to see you not touch the throttle until that point that you can start to unwind the steering wheel. So for here, until the apex point. So let's talk about why you're picking up the throttle this early. There's typically two reasons for drivers picking up the throttle early. I think the second reason is what you're doing here. Later on in the lap, I think there's a little bit of the first reason. So the first reason is in those higher speed corners, it helps settle the rear of the car so we're not getting some oversteer. And I think this technique's overused. I can think of really a handful of corners that I'm going to use this. It's the downhill at Lime Rock. It's the kink at Road America, turn 12 at Road Atlanta, the really fast corners. This isn't something that I would use in turn one. So the other reason why drivers get to throttle too early, and I think this is what's happening for you, is we've overslowed. And in our mind, overslow means let's pick up the throttle, let's get back up to speed. The problem is we're taking what I would call a mistake, overslowing I consider a mistake, and we're creating a bad habit off of it. Because we pick up the throttle right here, we induce understeer, which means then we can't get back to full throttle until it's too late, or we can potentially have snap oversteer on exit because we've induced that understeer. So what's happening right now is as you're turning more and more and more towards the apex, your hands are asking for more and more front grip, but your feet are taking away front grip. So what I would like to work with you on is, this is an overslowing problem. We're not going to fix this by braking deeper. What we're going to do here is a three-step solution. I'm going to highlight it later around the track to kind of pinpoint. And we're close here. So everything we're going to be talking about is small margins. But what I'd like to say is step one is, again, no throttle until that apex point. So wait. Bam, as we're starting to let the car be free, that's where I want my initial throttle to come in here. So we're going to take one step backwards here in terms of lap time, but it's going to allow us to take 3 or 4 steps forward. Because when we don't have that throttle back in this region, and we're just going to do everything the same on the start of the corner, we are going to be going slower initially until this point. But what's going to happen is you're going to emphasize that feeling of overslowing because now we don't have that throttle, right? So your brain's going to feel like, oh my gosh, we're so slow. And there's only two solutions to the overslowing problem. The first one is the one we don't want, which is getting the throttle too early. So when you take away that solution, your brain's going to naturally look for another way to solve its problem, of which is overslowing. The only other solution is by rolling more entry speed, and that's what we want to happen. So the key thing here is we're not going to be rolling more entry speed by braking deeper initially. What we want to, and I'm going to draw a data to help me explain this. If you're not familiar with data, don't worry at all, I'll explain it. We're going to be talking about brake pressure here. So at the bottom will be 0% brake pressure. The top's 100% brake pressure. We're talking about the brake zone in turn one. So I think you've got a pretty good hit of the initial brake pedal. We have peak brake pressure. We have a tiny bit of trail brake, but for the most part, we're not really trail braking too deep into the corner. So where our entry speed will come from is I want you to brake at the exact same place with the exact same pressure, but then think about getting off of that heavy brake pressure earlier and actually extending our brake zone to be longer. And the difference of the slopes to the lines here is where that entry speed will come in. So right now, it's almost like our apex speed needs to be, let's say, 55 miles an hour. So you get down to that mile an hour at the turning point. Now you've overslowed. Where now with this technique, you could be at 60 miles an hour at turning point. You continue to slow down, slow down, slow down, slow down. You've got the weight on the front nose. You've got the rotation we want. And then you could be more aggressive and get back to full throttle earlier because you've delayed it. So that's what's the way I want to work with this. And I think eventually you'll find yourself naturally braking deeper once you get to master the step 2. But that'll be a process and the last thing we work on. So your throttle trace, so we'll talk about throttle now. Right now, you kind of have a blip, get off of it, blip, and then it takes us a little bit longer to get back to full throttle. We're only really getting back to heavy, heavy full throttle near the exit curve. I would like to see your throttle maybe look something more like this. Get back to full throttle earlier. You're going to not have that throttle back in here. So your initial throttle comes later, but then we're rolling more entry speed. We're going to have probably the same minimum speed, but we're going to get a better exit or just as good of an exit with that more entry speed. So you can see here, I'm going to turn the volume back up. We're really only getting back to proper full throttle out over here. I'd like to see it come slightly earlier. You kind of get to it a little bit released and then back to it again. So this overall theme here, I'm going to kind of go back to a couple times and talk a little bit more about this. But this is the main thing that I want to work with you on is delaying that initial throttle application, really focusing on entry speed by trailing off those brakes, not by braking deeper. Turn 2 looks great. So now kind of going into the chicane, we're going to really focus on trying to trail brake deeper around this corner. So let's talk about what you're doing first. So I'm going to turn the volume back up and let's listen to throttle. So we're starting to feed it in here. So the ideal situation, this may not be quite possible. Ideally here, I want to try to bring enough entry speed to where I don't need any throttle coming into this next little zone. It's probably not possible. But what I'd like to see you do here is really try and delay our initial throttle application on this first corner to become much later. So what I'd like to see is really focus on that trail brake, which is going to help you kind of keep it to the left. The longer you can brake into this, the more weight you've got on the front nose, the more speed you can bring in while continuing to keep it to the left side of the road. What ends up happening is when we pick up that throttle, you get that understeer, and I think you end up too far to the right here. I don't want to be perfectly along the left side of the road, but you can see the racing lines out over here. So it's about a half car width wider than where you are. So I'd like to see you really, and I think you'll be able to roll more speed or at least the equal amount of speed while keeping it more to the left by not getting the throttle that early, by trail braking down into this corner so you get the weight on the front nose, get that rotation, and then keeping it left so that we're opening the radius for the right-hander here so we can bring more speed down the hill, get to throttle, and that'll allow you to be faster from this point all the way down to that next corner, where right now you might be faster than me from this first apex point. So you might be faster than me from this point until this point, but my trail braking means you're only going to be maybe slightly faster from there to there, but I'm going to be better set up so I can roll more speed, bam, get back to full throttle and get that run all the way down here. So really focus on trying to almost not get the throttle. So I'm really going to be coming in here, waiting, big brake, release, 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 release. It's like your big toes just rest on the back pedal, brake, 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 off, more to the left, wait, off, bam, 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 back to throttle, using that road on exit. And I think that'll allow you to roll more entry speed in there and set yourself up better for that next right-hander. So let's turn the volume back up here. Pretty good throttle application spot here, right at the apex. I'm happy with that. I think you look pretty good through here. The only note for me is it sounds like it takes us too long to get back to full throttle. We're only really getting full throttle out over here. And when you're going uphill, it should come quicker. So my only question or only thought would be maybe we need to roll slightly less entry speed so that you can try to get back to full throttle earlier. I think where you're picking up initial throttle is good, but we're only getting back to full throttle too late here. So let's think about ways that we can try to get back to full throttle a little bit earlier. And it might just be rolling slightly less entry speed because I think your apex point looks good. I think your turn-in point looks pretty good. Let's take a look at that. I think that cone's too late because it's an uphill corner. We want earlier turn-ins with uphill corners. You're picking up the throttle here. That all looks good to me. So let's just maybe back up a tiny bit of entry speed, try to get back to full throttle sooner there. Maybe a slight delay in initial throttle application, but that all looked pretty good to me. I was actually pretty happy with that. So let's turn the volume back up here. So this is the section where I really want you to focus more on that entry speed, focus on rolling speed here. So we're picking up the throttle at this point right now, and it's just way too early because now we're trying to keep it to the right side of the road, but we're inducing that understeer. And that throttle to me says, hey, I've overslowed. So I'd rather see you really focus on trying to brake not necessarily deeper initially, but lighter, brake, release, coast, 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 bam. Try to get a square to full throttle, set it up a little bit more to the right to work up for this left-hander here. So I think that's going to allow you to have more speed and keep it further right at this place. Maybe just have a squirt of back to full throttle really quick. Off release, you'll be coming in from a much wider radius because you'll be further to the right. You can see like where you're really turning in, you're kind of middle of the road already. And you're not really sacrificing on purpose. You've overslowed, and that overslowing you're not taking to your advantage. So let's focus more on that entry speed, delaying that initial throttle application, maybe a square to full throttle in here. Keep it further right, up, release, back to the left. Let's take a listen to your throttle through this section here. Back it up. So again here, slightly too early to throttle because we've now overslowed once again. So ideally, square to full throttle, release, wait, bam, this is where our throttle comes. So you can see it's only a car length or so later that we're looking at, but that's really evident to overslowing. So really focus on trying to be a little bit more aggressive on throttle here, release, get that rotation. Think about spending less time on maintenance throttle, a little bit harder to throttle, release, get back to throttle here. That's going to allow you to be in the same place. This section here I thought looked pretty good. Turn the volume back up. So that looked pretty good. Back to throttle again on this little section too early again. So I'd like to see you be a little bit more aggressive to throttle. Release, wait, bam, back to throttle. I know it's a little bit of cresting hill, so maybe we could be slightly earlier to throttle, but not as early as you are. You're kind of turning it and immediately back to throttle. Here's, again, a section that we want to delay, so focus on rolling that more entry speed. We get that by building the discipline to throttle, and then you'll naturally want to start rolling that entry speed because you'll feel too slow, and that's how we fix it, by being a little bit more, by bringing in a little bit more speed, not by picking it up that initial throttle too early. Through this section, I think we look pretty strong. Was happy with that. Turn the volume back up. Pretty good on throttle here. I'm happy with where you are. That all looks good. Good through here. I'm happy with that. Let's take a listen back through here. Just remember where we're picking up throttle. So I think this is a section where you're starting to feed in that throttle more as a security blanket to kind of keep the rear underneath you. It's a downhill corner. We are cresting, so the rear can definitely get light through here. But just think about trying to maybe lift a little bit, lift before the crest of the hill, and think about, can you roll over here just coasting? Can you delay that initial throttle application until this point and roll that at more entry speed? This is more a question of the car. That would be my objective. I may have to do what you're doing because maybe the rear gets too light, but I still want you to think about our objective should be more entry speed. And if the car can take it, let's focus on that. Let's not immediately rely on that security blanket because we don't want that initial throttle coming too early. Using all the road on exit, I'm happy with that. Full throttle through here, that looks great. Setting up for the last little bit of the lap. I think that looks pretty solid through there. I know we got a little bit of lift, but I'm pretty happy with that. So again, slightly too early to throttle here. This is a great place to really focus on that trailing off of the brake zone. So I back this up here. Let's go back here. We're going to be arriving. Bam, on the brake. Slow release, release. Bam, this is where I want to pick up throttle right here. And then let the car be a little bit more free on exit here. You can let it get out there, use that road out to our left. That's a smaller note, but really trying to focus on trail braking deeper into that corner, get that rotation, allow you to get back to full throttle a little bit earlier. That's going to give you that run all the way down through start finish back to turn one. So I hope all that makes sense. Once you've been able to watch this, please let me know if you have any questions at all. You can see the main factor that we're really focusing on here is trying to work with where you're picking up initial throttle, so we're not using that to help our overslowing, so that you can start to really work on the crux of the problem, which is what we need to be focused on, is rolling more entry speed in there. Focus on that back end of the brake zone. So the step one, no throttle until that apex point so you can start to unwind the steering wheel. Step two will be trying to focus on that back end of the brake zone, releasing, rolling the speed in there. And then finally, step three will be braking a little bit later. But hopefully that makes sense. Thanks again for using Racers 360. We're excited to be working with you. And hopefully we can work together more often in the future.